This chapter 2 explains how basic FX forwards and options and combinations thereof can be used to reduce or eliminate FX exposure, and how to explain the effect of such hedges by means of simple diagrams. For purposes of this chapter, we refer you first to this worksheet pricing, in which sterling dollar calls and puts are priced by means of a standard Garmin-Kohlhagen model, as well as the sterling forward, which is priced using the normal formula for FX forwards. You should review our module FX options if you are not familiar with the principal characteristics of the GK model. Note the assumptions appearing in column D, namely in D6 a spot rate of 1.5 as stated previously, in D11 annualized vol of 10%, which is the long-term average for foreign exchange, also mentioned in chapter 1, a tenor over here of 1 year, as you recall, and interest rates in dollars and sterling of 2% and 4% respectively. For now, the strike over here is set at the current 1.5 spot level, but shortly we will show a variety of alternatives. Note importantly the forward level of 1.47 in cell D7, reflecting an approximate discount to the 150 spot of some 2%, consistent with the 2% interest rate differential in favor of sterling. Please recall, incidentally, that the forward is not an input here, but an output, while all other 6 terms in column D are inputs. This next slide shows the prices of 1-year sterling European calls and puts with various strikes, now slowly turning red in the leftmost column, that lie along the range of values we had shown earlier with our exposure diagrams. All prices are quoted in US dollars per £1 sterling of notional. These prices have been derived using the worksheet pricing and a volatility of 10% across the board for all strikes, which is not in fact how the real market usually works. You will learn more on this topic when you study the concept of the volatility skew in one of our more advanced modules. But for now, please be aware that options having different strikes but otherwise identical terms are not normally priced using the same input for implied volatility. For example, options that are at the money are often priced using a lower volatility assumption than options that are deep out of the money, in order to reflect the possibility of a big jump in prices in a market crash or panic. In this table, the forward level of 1.4703 is also indicated for your convenience. The pattern of prices should be entirely intuitive, with calls now gradually turning red, becoming more expensive as the strike is lowered. Puts, now also turning red, becoming cheaper. And conversely, when the strike is increased. Also note the put-call parity principle at work in the middle row, where both the call and the put struck at the forward level have exactly the same premium. With these prices in front of you, we proceed to examine the pros and cons of various hedging strategies for the long sterling position with which we began this module. The simplest hedge of all is probably the outright FX forward, which involves quite simply the purchase by the US company of dollars in 1 year's time at a predetermined exchange rate of 1.4703 per pound against delivery of 10 million pounds. Diagrammatically, at inception, the company simply enters into the 1 year forward contract on a notional of 10 million pounds, as depicted here, for no upfront premium or other exchange of cash, ignoring any margining requirements imposed by the bank. 1 year later, assuming there is no delay in the settlement of the receivable, the company receives 10 million pounds from its customer in the UK, delivers this sterling amount to the bank, and collects from the bank exactly 14.703 million, irrespective of the spot exchange rate at that time. It will therefore be easily seen that the impact of the forward hedge on the company's exposure, currently shown while the company is still unhedged, is to transform this diagonal, if we change the letter N into the letter Y here, into a simple horizontal of height $14.7 million, as shown here on this worksheet, forward hedge. The outcome, as with any forward contract, is the same irrespective of the spot level on that day, and the company may find itself left with either a greater or a smaller amount of US dollars than it would have had if it had remained unhedged. The table below describes the three generically distinct outcomes under the forward compared to a decision to do nothing, i.e. to remain unhedged. Spot below 1.4703 at settlement, there has been an improvement under the forward. Spot exactly 1.4703, indifference, the result is the same, and of course, if spot is above 1.4703 on the settlement date, the forward has come to represent an opportunity cost. Turning now to simple option-based hedges. We consider first the use of an ordinary sterling put dollar call struck at the current spot of 1.5 and the impact this has on the company's overall position. Remembering that the premium for this put comes to $0.0738 per pound, so in total $738,000 given the 10 million sterling notional of the hedge, we need to consider the two alternative outcomes where the option expires alternatively in and then out of the money. These are discussed next. Case 1, if sterling spot is below the strike of 1.5 on the settlement date of the receivable, which is of course the expiration date of the option, the company would exercise the put, deliver to the bank the 10 million sterling it has received from its UK customer, and collect $15 million from the bank under the put. Subtracting from this amount the premium of $738,000 that the company had paid up front, leaves the company with net proceeds of $14.262 million. Note that we are ignoring here the time value of money, and specifically the fact that the premium for the put was paid to the bank 1 year before the settlement date. Now for case 2. If on the settlement date sterling spot is at or above 1.5, the company would walk away from the put and simply sell the 10 million pounds in the spot FX market, collecting an amount equal to 10 million times spot in US dollars, reduced once again by the upfront premium of $738,000. These outcomes are summarized in the table about to appear, confirming the discussion in the previous animated slide. These two outcomes are depicted on the graph appearing here from worksheet 1.5 Put Hedge, where we show both the hedged result along with the company's unhedged position to enable a useful comparison. We see clearly that where sterling has fallen substantially towards the left of the graph, the put has increased the dollar proceeds to the company versus the unhedged outcome. Emphasizing again, we are looking at the left. Precisely the case that was of greatest concern to the company. Where sterling has remained stable or has strengthened over here on the right of the graph, the put premium has reduced the company's net dollar proceeds versus the unhedged case. A shame with the benefit of hindsight, but a price the company presumably is willing to pay to achieve peace of mind. Finally, where sterling has fallen below 1.5, but by only a moderate amount. For example here, where sterling reaches 147 or so. The put increases the gross dollar proceeds for the company versus the unhedged case, but not enough to offset the premium paid up front, therefore leaving the company once again worse off than if it had remained unhedged. These are the three classical outcomes, if you will, of using any protective option to hedge a currency exposure. We take a minute to mention an important procedural matter at this point before returning to the exporter's hedging strategy. We have assumed above that when the put expires out of the money, the exporter sells his sterling in the FX spot market, showing this market in the diagram as a distinct entity from the hedge counterparty. As a practical matter in many jurisdictions, a convention has developed to provide in the confirmation itself that the sale of the GBP at the spot price will be executed with the hedge counterparty itself, for no particular reason really other than the two parties' general convenience. Of course, if there truly is one spot price only and no disagreement as to what that is, the exporter should not care, economically speaking, whether it deals with this counterparty or any other. The confirmation must, of course, define with precision the source for the determination of the spot price, whether via references to screens, newspapers, central bank announcements, or whatever, often in some form of ordered sequence in case one of these ceases to function. Typically, the confirmation also grants to the option holder the right, should he choose for any reason, to provide notice to his counterparty a few days prior to the option's expiration, under which he opts out of this requirement to deal with this counterparty and takes his business elsewhere for whatever reason. We emphasize again that if the spot market is deep and liquid and the spot price is indisputable, then this convention and the related opt-out feature make no economic difference to our analysis. An immediate alternative that presents itself is one involving a cheaper sterling put, cheaper specifically on account of a more distant strike. Consider, for example, the put struck at 145, which costs 0.0477 per pound, or $477,000 for the total notional of 10 million pounds. The two main outcomes now can be summarized by means of this table and run parallel in substance to the ones we saw for the 150 put, but with different absolute levels. Thus, sterling spot below 145, i.e. when the option is in the money at expiration, we exercise the put, receive 14.5 million. We don't go to the market to sell our pounds. The premium, we already have it here, 477,000 negative, and therefore the net dollar proceeds for the exporter, the difference between those two amounts, i.e. 14,023,000. Case 2, at expiration sterling above the strike, or at the strike, we do not exercise the put, we sell the sterling in the market at the spot price, and net of premium we are left with this amount here. These two sets of outcomes are now plotted on the graph appearing here in gray on this worksheet 1.45 put hedge, with the brown graph showing the outcome under our previous 150 put, and the olive diagonal, of course, showing the original unhedged position. Note the principal advantage of the 145 put over the 150 put. When the option expires unused over here on the right, the company has wasted less of its money on the premium, therefore is ahead overall. Although in both instances, remaining unhedged would have been the best decision of all. Over on the left of the graph, we see the two horizontals, the brown and the gray, illustrating the benefit of the puts with the two alternative strikes, but with different net outcomes given the difference in the strikes and in the upfront premiums. Make sure you are entirely comfortable with all figures you see on this diagram before proceeding further in this module. We could, of course, continue to analyze strategies involving yet more puts with increasingly lower or higher strikes, but we think by now you understand the pros and cons of these types of alternatives, so move on to something different. We turn instead to a strategy involving the purchase of a sterling put, let's say struck at 1.45 once again, and the sale of a sterling call at 160, for example, to reduce the net upfront premium. You can confirm that the premium for this call is $167,000. This combination of purchasing a put and selling a call for the same notional amount is referred to as a collar strategy, turning red in the title of this slide right now, and is among the most common strategies, along with its sister strategy of purchasing a call and selling a put, depending on the direction of the original exposure, that are used by companies to hedge FX risks with options. It may seem strange initially to hear that a company seeking to hedge an exposure would consider selling or going short an option rather than buying one. But you will understand in just a moment the precise logic of this approach. Note first that the company would spend $477,000, as we saw a minute ago, to purchase the 145 put, but would earn $167,000 selling the 160 call, resulting in a net upfront premium paid by the company of $310,000, appearing now at the top of the slide. The table appearing now summarizes the three distinct outcomes under this strategy, and you should click pause for a minute while you make sure you fully understand its contents. This strategy, unlike the ones we saw previously involving the purchase only of puts, establishes an upper limit in the bottom right cell of $15,690,000 for the net dollar proceeds of the sterling receivable, in return for lowering the cost of protection of the company if sterling should devalue beyond 145, enabling a higher minimum proceeds in the bottom left cell, which just turned red. In a sense, the company is foregoing the possibility of a highly favorable outcome under the unhedged receivable to reduce the cost of insuring against an ugly one. These various outcomes are now plotted on the graph appearing here in blue on this worksheet color, with the gray graph showing the outcome under the 145 put strategy, the olive diagonal as before showing the unhedged position, and the orange horizontal over here showing the forward hedge. Companies interested in colors often seek the proverbial best of all possible worlds and strive to eliminate the upfront premium of option-based strategies to create what is known as a zero premium color. There is an infinite number of combinations of puts and calls that would eliminate the upfront premium. But the one that is most readily visible from the pricing grid we saw at the beginning of this chapter, reproduced here for your benefit, involves the purchase of a put with strike 1.4 for a premium of $0.0282 per pound, now turning red in the column for puts, and now turning red in the column for calls, the sale of a call with strike 155 for a premium of, in dollars, $0.0280. Ignoring this small difference in these two premiums, we see that the net premium comes to zero and leaves the company long 10 million sterling under the receivable, also long a 10 million sterling put with strike 1.40, and short a 10 million sterling call with strike 155. The different outcomes that are possible on the settlement date under this strategy are summarized in this table, revealing once again an upper and lower limit on the dollar proceeds of the sterling receivable, but this time, and unlike the previous strategy, zero upfront premium to pay. These outcomes are again plotted on the graph, appearing here in blue on this worksheet zero premium color, while the olive diagonal shows once again the unhedged position, and the orange horizontal the forward hedge. We mentioned just a little while ago that an infinite number of put-call combinations can be created for a zero net upfront premium, and this is done simply by lifting the strike of the put by any amount, which makes it more expensive, while also lowering the strike of the call by some corresponding amount, which makes it also more expensive, thereby continuing to offset the two against one another to the extent necessary for the net premium to remain zero. Or vice versa, of course, by reducing the strike of the put while increasing the strike of the call. Note that if we increase the strike of the put and reduce the strike of the call, our upper and lower boundaries come increasingly close. And eventually, if we continue bringing them closer still, they converge into a single horizontal line, which you can see lies at the forward level of 14.7 million. At this point, the long put short call combination is a synthetic forward, and the point illustrates perfectly the put call parity principle we have encountered so many times elsewhere. This completes this chapter 2 as well as part 1 of this module.